Oh, I see. Okay.
I liked it. It was short games, and taking away, they can't shift now, right? All those things.
How you doing? Good. How are you?
On my way here, about something that happened. She was just filling me in. He finally broke. Did he? He admitted that she did. Took a while. But she would never. So I told her. All right, so it's good. I didn't follow her. All right, you will. She'll be a little relieved. It doesn't matter. She's not behind. I agree with you.
Program. All that's for words. It's a bridge program for kids that are struggling. They don't have to be special ed.
You're going to take in just like you did with the
I have those numbers. I think it's fine.
Oh, that's great.
Fun run, and so what we call it.
No, that's just
this next week. State assembly.
they're special.
Yeah.
That's for those kiddos
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Go for it, Scott.
Nutrition facts provides the supervision. She's so disciplined herself. She can talk, walk,
No,
talk.
Jeremiah and Diane is, yeah.
It's like this.
You mean during the school? Because there's nowhere else to go. Where is that?
Yeah, okay.
Stop. Yeah. What's happening now?
Pretty soon I will. How many grandkids do you have altogether? Four.
That's a nice. Not only
No. Very good. Yeah.
This allows us.
What? How many people bring anything else?
That's actually a good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea.
All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to get this party started. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully you guys brought your umbrellas, but curriculum and Mr. Becker.
Thanks, Mr. Chicago. We have 3 single-day conferences listed here, and then a multiple-day conference, it's like a Texas visit. And then talking about the discarding of some obsolete textbooks and materials that we have, and there's a list plans for it and an improvement plan. I was gonna let Dr. Meehan describe that, so.
Thanks, Mr. Becker. Yeah, I can take the rest of the items. So the obsolete textbooks, the board will recall that in November, we approved a whole raft of new courses within the Family and Consumer Science Department at the high school to establish 2 programs rather than just having a collection of courses. As part of that, there's new textbooks and resources that starting to come in. So teachers sometimes aren't great at getting old stuff out of the buildings. So that was part of the deal. When the new stuff came in, they did a clear out. So there's stuff there that they were using, and there's stuff there that probably the teachers before them were using. But it's all very outdated and all needs to go. So that's what that list is. Item B, the targeted support and improvement plan. Each year, the state looks at the data that's received from the Future Ready Index, which usually comes out in November. And then they set benchmarks that every school in the state needs to make, and it's based on the 5% of schools in the state with the highest poverty rate, because obviously those schools, the school districts are facing a lot of barriers, and so a place like Northern, we should be able to avoid being close to those schools in their outcomes. Unfortunately, some of the data goes back to 22-23, I think. So some of the data that came back to us in 22-23 and then also 23-24, we weren't far enough away from those schools, so we didn't make the benchmarks. It was in a specific area. It was in special education and graduation rate for students with disabilities, attendance rate, their academic performance, and also their academic growth. So what we need to do is we need to put a plan together. There are 3 different levels of intervention at the state. This is a very minimal level. So we have to put a plan together. We're going to manage the plan locally. There is no state oversight, but it does need to have board approval. That's why it's in front of the board. You will have noticed that the attachment itself is a good old state document. It's 16 to 20 pages long. So what I did is at the beginning of the document, I placed an executive summary there for you, which is just a page that you will be able to read through the highlights and see what we'll be doing to try and fix those areas. I will say that Mr. Burrell and his team were aware of some of the data back in 22-23 and have already begun to take measures to address some of the areas. And in fact, the latest data that we looked at, if they took the data from the latest data, we would be good in at least 2 of those areas. So we've already started some corrective action. But I do want to compliment Mr. Burrell and the high school administration. They took this very seriously, and they didn't ask, okay, what do we need to do to make this go away? They looked at it from a perspective of how can we make our programming better for our special ed students, and then that also overflowed into some general questions about educational services at the high school, particularly in 9th grade. So we met with special ed teachers, admin, parent, special ed students for a meeting, and that's where we came up with these. Action steps. So I won't read through those tonight. They're for you. Feel free to review the whole report and let me know. Or again, if you want the flavor of it, if you read that first page, that should give you all the information that you would need to know. So I can, if there's any questions on that now, I can take that, or I can also take any questions throughout this week or before we approve it at next board meeting. Okay. Item C is to approve the capital area intermediate unit to provide Title III services. So Title III are funds that come for English language learners from the federal government. We get about $10,000, and we pool our money in a consortium with a capital area intermediate unit, and with that bigger wallet, if you will, they're able to provide services that we can then tap into. So that is an agreement just to say that they will provide those services to us for the 25 and 26 school year. Are there any questions on that? Item D is to approve the dual enrollment agreement with Penn West. So Penn West was formerly California University, Clarion, and Edinburgh. They're now under the Penn West University name. Dual enrollment is a program that requires an agreement between Northern High School and the university that allows our students to take university level courses at a reduced rate. There's credits that transfer back to that university. They can also transfer to other universities if there's agreements, and the students can also earn high school credits. So Mr. Walker at the high school had noticed that we had an increase in students taking courses from Penn West, and he had initiated contact with them, and that is the resulting agreement that our students can take credits at Penn West for $75 per credit while they're in high school at Northern. So a huge reduction in cost. Any questions? You want me to keep going, Mr. Becker?
I can just say the library materials reconsideration report is the next thing. I guess you were going to say something about that.
Yeah, so this month we've had forward movement. I decided that report was getting quite long with some old information on it. So I removed some closed items. I think I was a little hasty. I removed two that you've not seen the outcome of. One of the books was retained. The other book was removed. I probably should have had that on the report. But just trying to streamline things, you'll notice that we haven't had any other requests for reconsideration this month, and that's allowing us to work our way through the reconsiderations that have been submitted. We did also, Mr. Miller came to the middle school and met with myself and Mr. Lehman and Mr. Sauer. Mr. Miller was interested in reviewing our process that we went through, so we gave an account of that. So Mr. Miller asked questions over us. We had a good conversation, and that will help advise Mr. Miller as he considers the items that come to the board for on challenge. So that has moved forward. Do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Miller?
I agree. It was a good meeting, good insight on the process that the principals go through. Also look to review them in the upcoming weeks here with the board committee. That board committee is going to consist of myself and Mr. Weir, reviewing any books that the person that requests them to be removed asked the board to look at after the principals made the decision.
Thanks for that. So that's moving on. And then the final item under the assistant superintendent's report is that Mr. Burrell will give us a presentation. It's called Potential Programs for Student Support. So I just wanted to give a quick context to that. Part of the context is actually in the targeted school improvement plan, where we decided to identify further supports for high school students. And then there's part of the presentation that talks about elementary students. So I think we're aware that there's nationally, locally at Northern, there's been an uptick in needs in elementary school level students in terms of like their executive functioning skills and some of the behaviors that they exhibit in the classroom, which are maybe at a higher rate than what we're used to. So we've been partnering with Mr. Burrell, speaking to and listening to teachers over the past year, and many conversations, and I think we're at a point now where we can come back to the board and provide some more detail to things that have been mentioned. So that's what Mr. Burrell is going to do this evening, is provide those details for us and allow the board to have further input and discussion. So, thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Meekin. And I know he commended Mr. Lehman and myself frequently when we were talking about targeted school improvement, but he did an awesome job leading that whole group as well. So thank you, Dr. Meekin. I'm going to touch upon, I think I have about 7 or 8 slides that I'm going to share and describe to the board. If at any time you have any questions, you feel free to stop me and ask as we go along, but there will also be a time at the end. So I'm going to just take a little walk back memory lane here and give you some context as to what our program looks like, what we're currently doing, what we've done basically 2 years ago, and the direction I would like to see us move in, and hopefully we can get to a point where we can do a lot of our in-house services as much as possible. So if you look at the slide, the bulleted there, right now we currently have 529 students receiving special education services. I listed the 3 disabilities. They don't equal the 529, but 222 have a learning disability, which is our largest group. We have 92 students identified with autism, which is a significant increase over the last couple of years, and I'll get into a little bit more detail of that. And also, the last one we have there is 57 emotional support students. That is an uptick. We're seeing an increase across the district, like Dr. Meekin said, even nationally, that category's growing, okay? And I don't see it going down anytime soon, just because of the mental health and the needs of our students. Out of district placements, there's a lot of information here. I'll try to break it down. If you look at 24-25, this past year we had 45 out of district placements, and then beside it in parentheses you have no transfer. About 2 years ago I came to the board and we had 2 autism support classrooms in the district that were housed and run through. We housed them, but they were run through the IU, okay? And when we do that, basically they use our space and we pay the same amount to have our students attend those classes. Anytime we talk about an autistic student for an out-of-district placement, you're looking anywhere between $65,000 and upwards to $80,000 or $85,000 based off of what related services that they need. So we knew our autism numbers were growing, and we made up probably 90% of the population of those 2 classes. So we decided, we came to you guys 2 years ago with a proposal for what we call a transfer of entity. We were bringing those classrooms back to Northern, and we were hiring the staff, we were hiring the aides, and we were providing those services to our students, and therefore they came back to us. Since we did that, we were able to bring back 9 students that we normally were paying the IU, $75,000 a piece for average. We brought them back at a cost for us that was $11,000 last year, okay, to educate each one of those students. I will go on the record to say we have 2 classrooms. We put one at Dillsburg Elementary, and Rachel Scheib is the teacher there, right out of college. We hired her last year. And we have one at Northern Elementary where Kirsten Good is the teacher in that room. It is amazing. They're phenomenal classrooms. I put them up against anybody else in the area. Serving that, we partnered with an agency called Andrew's Gift. They provided all kinds of grant money for us, so the supplies in those classrooms, they're picking up all those costs. So We did that 2 years ago, knowing that our autism classroom is increasing. If you look at 23-24, we had 46 out of district placement. If we didn't bring those classrooms back, we would have had 57 out of district placements. 22-23 and 21-22, we did not have those classrooms. So you can see, we noticed there was going to be a bump. That 50 to 57, we knew were going to be those students identified as having autism. Next year's projection, 25-26, we have 40 projected out of district placements. Okay, 56 if we didn't have the transfer, and in district placement Wellsville class. Halfway through this year, we had an IDP class, in district placement class, come to Wellsville, run through News Story. That's capped out at 8 kids. We had 6 northern students come in there. It's projected next year that 2 of those students that we brought back into that classroom are returning to our regular ed classrooms. So they get to go back to their home district. Their alone is $75,000 each if we were placing them outside the district. But money's one thing, but the services and meeting the students' needs, and you guys are parents, having your student attend the home district building is huge for these parents. And we know that, so our goal is to keep them within. So roughly the projected savings, if you would pay the IU, later on you're gonna vote for our IU bill, it's like $600,000. A couple years ago, that was in upwards of $1.5 to $2 million because we were educating these students with autism through the IU. So there's a significant savings coming from that. Not only that, once again, it meets the needs of our students better, and we can transition them back. The cost of the in-district placement, we're projected to have 4 students instead of 6 next year. It's a $15,000 savings per student since we brought it back to Wellsville. So that's how we come up with the savings, and that's yearly. I just want to point that out. You know, that's taken into consideration the amount that we spend for the teachers that we hire and the aides in there. Area of need, I think we have a great program, but it doesn't mean that we can't get better. So the one area, when we look at it, we hear what's going on out there, we talk to teachers, we talk to administrators, we get out into the buildings. The need is now becoming that supplemental full-time emotional support at all levels. And what I did here was elementary, middle, and high school. You see different things when you talk about these students. At the elementary, what we're seeing is our number one, concern or top of that list is elementary student behavior and aggression. We're seeing an uptick in both those areas. Our teachers, Charles will probably testify to this. Teachers, we're seeing different types of behaviors in those classrooms. Not only does it, limit the student doing those behaviors, it also limits those other students in those classrooms. Okay? So, and it's nobody's fault. These kids are coming in, they're not getting early intervention, they might have trauma, they're just not ready for school in a lot of situations. So that's what we're seeing at the elementary. There is an academic piece down there, but that's not up top. If we can get the behaviors under control, the academic piece will probably come along with it at the elementary level. When you move to the middle school level, behavior is a piece of it, but now we start seeing those kids struggle academically and they start falling behind. And then when they start falling behind academically, what do we see an increase of? That behavior, okay? Now they're not disrupting just their own education, it starts impacting the education of others in the classroom. Moving to the high school, what we talked about, Steve and I, and we brought the bridge program to you earlier, is now we're seeing just a disengagement. Okay, school's not fun anymore. I'm failing. I've always failed. I never pass. I got home life issues. I got friendship issues, mental health issues. Now school's not fun, I just become disengaged. And then what do we do with these kids? And these aren't not identified students receiving special ed services. This could be any kid. Then they start failing, academic, if they don't think they can be successful, of course, behaviors increase, and ultimately, the worst of everything is they stop coming to school. Okay, and what do we do with a kid that doesn't come to school? There's still requirements that we have to fulfill, and ultimately, we want to see everybody succeed. So that's the basis for what I'm going to move into going forward, but this background, I think, is important for the next couple slides. Good there, Marie. At the middle school and elementary, it will be a consortium-based classroom. Consortium-based classroom means they're not all potentially going to be Northern students. That's just the way consortium classrooms are. Why do we do it? We may not have 8 students for this program. Carlisle may have a few. Mechanicsburg may have a few. We will cap it at 8, but we'll also bring in possibly at the middle and elementary level non-Northern students. These are the classrooms we currently have. I'm not going to read over all of them. MPS is multiple disabilities. IDP is that in-district placement. I put the number of students that are currently in that class, and then beside it, I put how many Northern students that are currently in those. So you look at our primary and intermediate ILS, it's all Northern students. MPS, we have 3 Northern students and then 3 outside. I think there's 2 from Mechanicsburg, 1 from Carlisle, or Big Springs, and so forth. If you look at the bottom, although we have these consortium classrooms, our consortium members also have classes in their district where we send our students to meet their needs. So we have 12 students in outside consortium classes, and we have 10 consortium students in our classes. So that puts things in perspective where it's this not Northern doing all the heavy lifting here. We share the wealth and we go from there. Those autism kids at the elementary level are slowly coming to the middle school level. Mechanicsburg's taking on the middle school autism classroom starting next year. So that's just how we all work together to get the job done and provide the services that our kids need. So what are we looking at? We spent a lot of time on the high school program, the bridge program at previous meeting. We shared that it would be a district teacher. This is the only district position that we would recommend and suggest moving forward. So that, I think there was a lot of time. Just to go back a little bit, this process started in January and February, okay? And we met with News Story, we met with River Rock, and we were like, these are the needs that we are seeing in our district. What can you do to partner with us and come up with some solutions? So that was February. And then I met with them, Rhonda met with them. In February, we moved to like March-ish. We started including, they came back to us and said, I think we have something elementary, I think we have something middle school for you. High school is not as clear. And that's when I started talking to Steve, and we were like, we could come up with something for our high school that doesn't include News Story, but I think we should partner with News Story moving forward in the middle and the elementary. And I'll share why here in the next couple. So that's where we're at. Go ahead there, Marie. Next slide. Benefits of the program, of the partnering with News Story. We would keep it a small class size. Legally and state guidance, compliance, we can have up to 12 kids in those classrooms. When I went to News Story, I was like, I want to cap it at 8. Why do you want to cap it at 8? First off, it's the first year for it. I want it to start right. I want us to have a solid foundation before we move forward. And in the long run, I got to look out for Northern students. So that gives me some flexibility of 4 spots, okay? So if I have 8 max and I got a kid move in January and it's a Northern student, and there's really not a place for that student, in the back of my mind, there is a place for that student, okay? I'm not gonna take an out-of-district kiddo for 9, 10, 11, and 12. I'm saving that. So it allows me a little bit of flexibility to service our kids. If we don't house that program, I don't have that flexibility. I have to rely on other people. It is a consortium class. New Story provides all staffing and support. We don't hire the teacher. We don't hire the aides. We provide the classroom space for them. We hook them up to our internet. They can, of course, use our printers and things like that. But we don't hire the staff. We don't supervise the staff. If there's an issue with the staff, I can pick up the phone. Brittany is somebody I work with. Brittany Fields oversees it. But ultimately, you guys may know Rich Fry is the overall leader of New Story right now. Dan and Christina Spielbauer, I'm not afraid to call them as well. Okay, so we have a great working relationship. Professional development opportunities, you know, both Christy, they would be housed out of South Mountain and Troy, both highlighted this as a positive, that our staff could use some professional development in how to handle these students. You know, some behavior management, you know, advice, professional development. That would happen, I think, naturally through this, but they would also be willing to come in and in service days or you know, Team Tuesdays or something like that to provide some professional development in these areas that currently we're not real strong in, I'll be honest with you. For a variety of reasons. Have space for students. There currently is a waiting list for New Story. We were just at a consortium meeting and Carlisle's like, I have a kid. I have an elementary incoming kid. I called New Story. New Story said, we'll put you on the waiting list. And she's like, that never happened before. I'm like, well, I knew it because we were starting our list and we were told that it was a waiting list back in January and February. So elementary programs are full, guys, okay? No longer can we wait until halfway through the year and say, hey, I need a spot. There's none out there. Okay, so we have to be proactive in matching the needs and what we have and creating that flexibility within and not relying on somebody else to drive our support system. And it's still a bridge program. It's different in sense to the high school program, but we still use this program to bring kids back and also use it as a level of intervention before those kids go to a center base. I was just at a meeting yesterday. We had a kid in Carlisle at Roxbury Road out beyond Newville. He's a prime candidate for this. So if we bring this program in, he's coming back to us. If we don't have this program, I can't bring him back to us because we don't have the support in the classroom to provide for him. So just keep that in mind. In-house program, you see it there. I know we already talked about it. It's one thing that I'm not sure we mentioned a lot of. It's what we call Tier 2 MTSS intervention. This is for regular and special ed students, so it's not a Tier 3 intervention. Right now, we don't have a lot of MTSS Tier 2 interventions at the high school. It's just difficult, and we don't have a lot of them. And the rest is basically the same. Go ahead there, Marie. With benefits also becomes potential obstacles. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I want to be honest and upfront with you. Some of these could be a strain on the staff currently, even though it's overseen by News Story staff and so forth. If a kid blows up, it still puts pressure on our building principal. I did talk to Christy. Christy's been part of the process throughout all, and thanks, Matt. So she's on board. So in saying that, you know, that's one of the obstacles we'll just have to work through. Okay, I did mention that it's non-northern students, so you know, like any other consortium class, we could have non-northern students there. Classroom spaces, we already have it worked out. It's a 2-year agreement. That's where we're at. We also worked out the space. There's always scheduling. When you bring a new program in, it doesn't matter. I don't care what program it is. If you add another teacher in 4th grade, there's still scheduling obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. And that last misplaced student, you know, anytime you have a special class like this, you want to make sure they're a good fit for that classroom. And some districts look at it differently than maybe Northern's viewpoint. Once again, we will still have say in who's entering our classrooms, and we will observe any student before they come into us to make sure it's a good fit for a program. In-house staffing is a potential barrier, but I think that'll come along fine. We'll find a teacher. Curricular demands and scheduling, I mentioned, I hit upon that, and misplaced students, I already spoke about that as well. Go ahead there, Maureen. Okay, financial impacts. There's a lot on those slides, but News Story partnership, they'll be capped at 8. We have 16 total seats if you look at the middle and the elementary school. I put in there, it's like 53,000. That's going rate for outside placement. We're projected to have 5 students right now in the elementary spots based off of what we know, and 4 projected at the Northern Middle School out of those 8. Financial impact, we say is basically cost neutral for us. I just spoke about the little guy that we had a meeting for yesterday. If he comes back to us, that's a savings of probably 45,000 to 50,000. If he stays there, it's going to cost us the same. So we would bring back probably out of the middle and high school, we're looking at bringing back like 4 students from outside placements that I think could fit into that. We have 2 early intervention students that we already know are going to be needing some additional support. So we would pencil them in. And then I always pre-purchase a slot or 2 at each level just for those kids and make sure I have a slot where I can still pre-purchase a few, but I don't have to do as many as I normally would. Also, the last part is something that I basically negotiated with News Story. It's only for Northern as of right now. Since we would host, this would be the 3rd classroom, they're willing to give us $30,000 each year for hosting these News Story classrooms. Because I said, I have something that's a premium for them. We have the space, they have the program, and if they don't have the space, they can't offer the program. So that was one of those, I was like, we need something to house these classrooms, and that's what they came up with. So I think that's fair. But that's all factored in. It'd be basically a wash if we would bring these 2 classrooms back to Northern. In-house bridge program, we did share the financials with that. We would have to hire a teacher and an aide, which is $130,000, which sounds significant. But when I look at each, that's conservative, at Yellow Breeches and River Rock, $35,000 a slot. If we save 4 kids from going out of district, we pay for that teacher and that aide. Okay? And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a handful of kids that, 4 kids at these spots isn't hard to fill, guys. Okay, so basically, just by bringing maybe 1 or 2 and saving 2 from going, you're basically paying for that spot. I know it's an extra position, but it's going to pay for itself rather quickly. Go ahead, Derek. Board is asked to, this is real brief. You can read it, approve, look at it. Give us the green light to finalize the deal. Allow us to move forward with the in-house high school bridge program, and the rationale is it would provide a level of support across all levels that we currently do not have. It reduces costly out-of-district placements, it builds in-house capacity, and I touched upon that numerous times. I want to control the level of support and where our kids are. I don't want somebody else to tell me what I need to do for our students. And next steps, we can finalize the agreement. We can identify appropriate staff, in the high school bridge program. And then we can begin telling parents, and when I have end of the year meetings, okay, your son or daughter's going to be in this program next school year. I can't do that right now until we all come on board and you give me the green light to do it. As far as the logistics, we'll have that taken care of. We almost have that all finalized as of right now. And that's a lot of information. I try not to be too long, but definitely house any questions that you may have, but I just want to be proactive and provide the support to our students that they need. Jerry.
So just a question on the IU and early intervention for pre-K kids.
Right.
How are those kids identified and referred to the IU before they even come to us? How does that work?
Pediatricians. The IU usually reaches out somewhere along the line that it's usually family driven. If you have a kid, what's that? Preschools play a part in that. I wish it'd be cleaner.
Well, one of the negatives of geriatrics in this area is that there's no head start program. So a lot of sometimes if there's a head start program, we could identify there too, but in this area, there's not one. So that's why they've said it's sometimes it's a little difficult to find.
How many do you think we have currently?
The IU, we had 36 coming to us this year. Now, in determining that, 36 of them, the great part is probably like 18 or 20 of them are speech and language only, which are a whole different ballgame. A lot of those kids will grow over the summer, get speech services, and they don't need intensive support. We actually get a list from the IU, and what we'll do in November is we start going out and observing them. Those kids that have documents or receiving those intensive support, Rhonda, myself, Danielle, Karen, we're out observing them, starting to formulate when we meet with the parents of like, this is where we're looking to send you. But in saying that, now that we took on Washington Township, we not only work with the IU at Summerdale, we have to work with LIU 12, okay? Which we're finding now is some of those kids aren't receiving services, early intervention down in that area. Parents, even though they qualified for them, what we're finding out right now, more and more, parents are rejecting them. My kid doesn't need it. My kids don't have behaviors at home. My kid's ready for school. And then they come into our school and they aren't ready for school. They don't know how to play school, and that's where we're seeing the uptick of behaviors at the elementary level. For those kids that got a lot of resources, we can sort of get the game plan and get the program appropriate for them ahead of time, but it doesn't always exist. 2 of those early intervention kids showed up at our kindergarten registration. It was like, whoa, they need additional support, and they're not even identified yet. So.
What do you do with the kids that aren't don't have early intervention or any of that kinds of stuff? Once they come into school, some of these teachers are really struggling with disciplinary stuff and everything else. And if there is an additional problem or connectivity there with that kiddo, when does that become, instead of just saying this kid's acting out or a bad kid, when do you or whoever
We would start the process. We have, guidelines and compliance that we need to. For those kids that come in, we do a good job screening them at kindergarten intervention if we know what we can, but there's always 1 or 2 that we just can't find. So to answer your question, that we would probably put out what we call permission to evaluate, which starts the process of gathering that information. But that we're supposed to have that done in 60 days, and then an IEP 30 days after that. Or you're looking at 90 days, you're looking at 3 months, okay? Now, we don't want to take a kid that's completely misplaced and say, here you go, teacher, here you go, Joyce Cal, this kid's on you for the next 90 days. We would probably fast track that, okay, and do our best. But where we're running into problems right now, I keep reiterating, once no out-of-district placement's taking a kiddo without an identification.
Right.
Okay? They just won't take them. They're not allowed to. So we would fast track it. Right now, we have to rely on them and having spots. So if I call them up and say, hey, I got this kid in River Rock, we have great relationships with them, but they're gonna say, I don't have any spots. And then once again, they come back to us because we have to educate them. That answers a little bit of the reason why we need programs like this, because we would have flexibility, we fast track them. Now, we can put them in a program like this and see, okay, some kids change. 3 months into school, some kids say, I get it.
Right, they get.
And they get the routine, they get to know how to play school and that kind of stuff. But for those that don't, now we have a level of support in-house, because the other obstacle we run into is, and you guys are parents, I come to you as a kindergarten kid and say, guess what? Your kid's not going to South Mountain anymore, he's going to Shiremanstown to school. Parents are gonna come back, and parents, a young kid, kindergarten, first, second grade parent, they're not always on board to say, take my kid to Shiremanstown, take my kid to Yellow Breeches over in Newville.
What do you do with the parents that are rejecting, like, no, my kid's fine, but when there are this, like, what happens with them? Are the teachers, like, just forced to try and figure it out? Do they have support? Like,
You have to massage, and that's why we're fortunate to have Rhonda McMullen, and she's that liaison, and we try to build a relationship with the parent, because a lot of times they're seeing the same type of aggression at home. Okay, they don't always admit that at first, but once you develop and you start saying, this is what we're seeing, a lot of times it comes out that it's not only happening at school, it's also happening at home. And, we just massage that and ultimately try to get the best place for those students. That's why having options is important.
it's just concerning for those teachers and then for the other classmates that
Yep.
aren't struggling with that, to see that, and, if a child has an outburst or something, and then trying to make the situation safe, it's,
Right, I get it.
trying to have the support from those teachers in that
Right.
element, so.
Yeah, and that's why I think having the whole level, these are pull-out classes at the elementary and middle school. They are pull-out, but with the hope that once they build those executive functioning skills, or we get those behaviors under control, maybe they can start going out and phys ed in our classes and work their way back into a regular education setting. That's our ultimate goal, that we don't push them to a center base, but once again, it's a level of support to help us make that determination. And I know I spoke with Mr. Hazen, collecting that data. If we have this placement for these students and we start tracking behavior and what we're seeing, and we show that to the parent and say, we tried this and it's not working, he needs a more restrictive environment. Now we have the data to support that, where currently we don't have that because we don't have this type of program. Yeah.
Where's the physical placement in the high school? Which school location?
That's yet to be determined. I know Steve and I spoke briefly on that. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we have a room that we're gonna, if this would go through, we're gonna restructure something that would open up a room with windows and a nice spot for them, so.
And we have some flexibility once again in the special ed. All of our teachers have nice, big, huge rooms, which isn't always the case everywhere else. So if we have to, combine a learning support room, it sounds like they already have it, but there's some flexibility that we can get the room. And it would be out of South Mountain, the elementary program. Troy and I spoke about a room, and he's like, we'll find a room, because they're on board for the program, and they're like, we're not gonna let, we can do some combining. Yeah, so spacing won't be an issue. Zach?
We have 2 rooms now. Do you see this growing into more?
Possibly. I can tell you there's conversations with our autism classrooms where we have 2. We brought back the Wellsville one, the New Story one out there, but our numbers are so high right now, with that population coming into our school, we had to be very creative in where we're placing students. But next year, if we continuously get 12, 13, 14 kids identified with this disability, we might have to look at a potential third, down the road. Hopefully we keep that on our radar and once again, try to be proactive as much as possible. But it could grow. Or we try for 2 years and, it goes the other direction. We're not in it for the next 10 years. We could just not sign the agreement after 2 years. But this is the trend that I think a lot of districts are going to start taking because this is the best way to service kids and they're provide additional spacing for kids needing this type of support.
Sounds like you're doing a good job of cost containment and trying to handle as much as you can in-house, which I value. I would say that's a great idea. Is a lot of, to what degree are you able to include parents in whatever remediation you're trying to? I think families are key to perhaps it becoming a problem in the beginning or getting it fixed once it is in motion. So to what degree do you have interface with families, get them involved, maybe teach them how, to some degree you can't go out and necessarily spend several hours with them and work with them. I don't know how you can do that.
Yeah, that relation starts being built from the day they enroll here. Our enrollment process, we have some questions, if it's a kindergarten, does your student receive early intervention? If they're moving from a district, does your student have an IEP? Does he qualify for special ed? As soon as we know that, it starts triggering a lot of meetings, a lot of interaction between us, the district, and the family. I'd say that's one of our strengths, including the parents, especially when we start talking about these more intensive support. Parents have to be on board or they're not going, so I said, use the word before, the massaging of it. Sometimes it takes a year or two. Okay, but we have some hard conversations with families, and at first they may not be in agreement. They may not say very nice things about us, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to do what we think is in the best interest of the kids in special ed. Parent needs to sign off on that. So if we don't get the parents on our side, 9 times out of 10, we're not getting the end result that we want. So that relationship is built in a variety of ways, through a variety of people. I just fielded a phone call today, and called a parent on a 504 plan that's pronged in different ways, but it's just a team effort to get the parents on board. And every family's different. Some families like, go for it, we trust you, we believe in you, and then the next parent is ripping me apart. And I have to be a sounding board and, ultimately try to create ways to get that parent on board. But you gotta be creative sometimes.
I know I kind of touched on this a little bit, but have we already started to work with our teachers as far as like how to handle these situations? Because I think that's a huge concern for mine. I have some friends that are teachers, and they tell me sometimes that it can be very trying because there is no and corporal punishment isn't the word that I want to use, but there's no, okay, you're done. It's you need to take a break, or you need to leave, or you need to go to the principal's office, or I need help, or I need a hand, and that's not usually how it goes down. Are these teachers getting help if they need it, or is there a plan in place or this chain of command or a step-by-step, if this starts to happen, call this person, is that happening, or is that part of the professional development that you want to implement?
That definitely would be a piece of the professional development. Is there plans put in place? Most of those kids have some type of behavior plan that's already put in place.
Correct.
Because it's probably the first time it happens, no, it's not. But if it happens on a pattern, a lot of times the team will meet at the elementary or middle school, the MTSS teams come in, we have a behavior specialist, Karen Schmidt, she's retiring, we already replaced her. We get her involved. We've used the IU to come in and provide support. So there is avenues to support. Is it an area we can continue to grow in? Absolutely, because districts, my wife's a 3rd grade teacher at Camp Bill, she's running into the same problems. I wish I could wave the magical wand and say to the teachers, hey, we can take this kid and, place them in somewhere or move this kid. But I also say, put your shoes on the other side and the other feet and be the parent of that student and somebody come in and say, you know what, your kid's moving schools. That's the battle that we run into. We try our best to balance that and come up with some, and some teachers want it to happen overnight. And then we're like, whoa, pump the brakes, it doesn't happen overnight, there's so much I can do. And then we have other cases, we had teachers beginning the year, Jerry sat in the classroom, it was, 2 weeks later, the kid was at River Rock. So we do our best, but unfortunately, there's some teachers that want to see it happen quickly, and it just doesn't happen that quick. But we are in it together.
Well, when the situation, I appreciate you,
Yeah.
you're very thorough. When the situation is right, like saying there's, an active incident, that's what I'm gonna say, in the classroom at the time, what are the teachers, like we have fire drill, everyone line up and go out the door. Do they have something that they know or understand that this is who I'm supposed to call right now, this is happening? Like, are they all informed of that? Do they have that policy in place?
There isn't a one.
Is that a principal issue in each building to deal with that?
Unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all.
Okay.
Like I said, most of the individual behavior plans are they're all individualized. So what works for one student may not work for the other, so we can't have there are procedures, worst comes to worst, clear the classroom and leave that kid in. That can be done, and that's relayed. That's rare. A lot of times these kids will have behavior programs where if they're having an outburst, there is a plan in place to address those behaviors. It's up to the teacher to know that plan, they get that plan, and it's up to the teachers to follow that plan. And I'll be honest with you, not all teachers follow the plan with fidelity, and then they come back and say, this kid needs support, and I have to provide some kickback of saying, are you following this plan? Did you give the kid a timeout card? Did you ask the kid to go down and see our emotional support teacher? No, I didn't do that. Well, then I really can't help you because you have a plan that you're not following. And we see that as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Like, I obviously, my little brother is severe, he's like a 30-year-old, 4-year-old, so.
Yeah.
I see it firsthand, but, I was just wondering, like, if they have, those bullet points are, this is what's happening right now, okay, this is where I need to be, and this is my next step, this is my next step. I was just wondering if that's something that they're given or have that available to them.
They have it. Usually what happens is when we have an outburst, the team will get together. 90% of the time, 99% of the time, it's not unusual. It's the same students. You start seeing the pattern behavior, you start developing a plan of intervention. We're trying different things, and that can look differently. Some kids used to say, hey, if you do this, you get to be the leader in front of the line, and they're all for it, and that's all it takes. Other kids are like, I don't want to be leader in the line. I could care less about that. So, we get to the end. In most cases, we get to a good point. Anything else? Awesome.
I was gonna ask something, this may be a little bit out of bounds, but if a kid is recalcitrant, he or she is just gonna be a wise guy or a wise girl, in this long ago, you could do something different than what you can do today. Is that due to the law changes or whatever interventions there are? Is that due to, let's say, state rules? Was that construct of the federal government, or I'm just curious because obviously I haven't been in school for a while. So, but I know that some of the stuff that used to kick off when I was in school was terminated pretty quickly sometimes. And I'm not going to say how it was. It just didn't happen. And the next guy or girl who wanted to kick it off, they might have thought before they kicked it off because there were people in the hallways. So I'm not trying to compare now to when I was in school, but I'm asking, are there federal or Pennsylvania guidelines or laws that have been
it's how they stop it, and that's what you're getting to. There's no doubt that those methods have changed. I think going back to, speaking from personal experiences, the way my parents handled me discipline-wise is different than parents are in some cases handling their children at home. And we're seeing that carry over into the school. How we can handle it definitely is different. You know, I often always say I had ADHD. There's no doubt about it. I couldn't sit still in my seat. You know, but Miss Lamb got me to sit still in my seat. She's a reading teacher in 7th grade. Now, I'm not going to say how, but I think we all know how. You know, but that can't be done right now. That was 40 years ago. You know, if we did that right now, Miss Lamb would be fired. She'd be terminated. So I think that's the balancing act that we have to take into consideration, and that's why I think making these suggestions and providing different levels of support is to provide as much support across the district in all of our classrooms. So when we start seeing kids like this, we have another path that we can take rather than just get to the end of the year because next year they move on to 5th grade. Well, guess what? 5th grade teachers don't have the same problems if we don't do anything. So that's why I think we need to look at programs similar to this, try to lay that foundation, and do what's best for these kids that need the additional support. And personally, I've got biases, but I think this would point us in the right direction.
I'm not suggesting we go back to whatever. I don't want to get myself.
I think it was touch my toes.
Yeah, I don't want to suggest that. But I guess if the increasing cost, if it's 50,000 per student or 60 per student, to place them outside, and if the number seems to be growing with no end in sight, that would raise a question of what can be done about it. If it's only responding to a already evolving problem in things the way we are as a culture, as a society, it would cause one to wonder if it's that much per student, and we're getting more and more all the time, it seems to be no end in sight. If that's the case, then what's to be done? And that's a long-range solution to that cultural, social, whatever, that problem. And that's not necessarily a school board question, but it's just something that comes to mind. If that's an ongoing.
Well, I can tell you where the different levels of support have been beneficial for us, and Steve didn't leave. You know, we came up with a partnership with YAA. Okay, York Adams. What is it? YAA, York Academy. That's it. York Adams Academy. We're the only district in York that didn't have it 2 years ago. And I got a phone call. I didn't know anything about it. Dr. Meekin's wife was actually involved in the process. We partnered with them 2 years. This is our 2nd year. And they have a different type of program where kids can go and get credits much quicker. Okay. And get them more engaged. They see a timeline. And we've had 7, 8 kids graduate over the last year and a half that wouldn't have graduated for us, okay? But we provided another option to get them to the finish line, and it's successful, and it's relatively inexpensive. They have to provide their own transportation, they have their own program, they do all the stuff, but we got to continue to look at those types of avenues and routes to take to get to the finish line, and for some kids it wouldn't work, but for these kids, it worked, and they're graduated, and they're happy, they got success. You know, a lot of times they dig themselves a hole because they're failing. Well, anybody that fails over and over and over, you can't dig yourself out of that hole. So we got to give them options to dig out of that hole, and that's the mentality that if they have a little bit of success, they'll take it and run with it. And we've seen that as a result numerous times. Good. Thank you.
All right, so budget and finance, Mr. Rudy.
Letter A is payment of bills. Letter B is the treasurer's report. C, board various accounts. D, standard personal tax exonerations. E, real estate tax refunds. F is approval lump sum payment for NYEA collective bargaining. G is an agreement for childcare services with the Mechanicsburg Learning Center. Letter H is a service agreement with Care Solus. I is an agreement with the CAIU. J is our agreement with G-Force Security.
I have a question about that one.
Yeah.
Looking on that, item number 7, that I went down through there, listed them as unarmed security guards. Do we have any armed security guards for, because the agreement didn't list armed security guards.
Yeah, so this contract is for extracurricular coverage. We have 3 armed security guards that are governed by a different contract, which is a 3-year contract. This is simply for when Angie, when we need extra support, building up event staff, G-Force, this contract. So they send unarmed when we need someone out here to support. If we need it armed, we probably first go to our own guys that have our 3 G-Force guys, might go to Carroll Township.
So if a G-Force person is working an extracurricular event, are they armed? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't.
If there are 3 G-Force employees, they maintain their armed status. But when we contract with G-Force for other coverages after school, they're not armed.
And they're different people.
They're
You're
different
saying than the 3
but
that we know.
Yes, so this contract provides access to other G-Force security officers to help us cover when we have a ton of events and we just don't have enough of our own event staff to do it.
Letter K is every student succeeds act letter of agreement with York County Office of Child, Youth, and Families. Letter L is agreement with CAOLA Services. Letter M is the approval of the final budget resolution, which I will not read until I have to. Letter N is the homestead and exclusions resolution, which those numbers will be forthcoming.
Yeah, I'd like to have that for this evening. I haven't gotten through that sheet, so I'll send that to the board in an email, but you'll have that for next week.
Letter O is to approve the rates for summer help. Letter P is to approve a budget transfer of $1.6 million for our portion of the project over at Cumberland Perry. Q is to approve a donation from Catapult Engineering for CNC machine. Letter R is to appoint Jason as the treasurer for the board. Letter S is to authorize the business manager to purchase through various consortiums and typical buying locations. And then T is the approval of 25-26 support staff salary ranges and substitute rates.
So this was discussed as part of the budget process, so this shouldn't look new to the board. I am gonna ask Maureen that we just strike item O for the board meeting, because it is on this sheet as well. It's just duplicating what we have on here, so I don't think there's a need to have item O, or that item O on the agenda for next week. The only change is with the food service items here, and that did change from what we had discussed and what you had seen originally. The food service class 2 is changed on this, and I'm gonna let Scott speak to both that and just his overall food service budget for next year, so.
That's right. Thanks. So typically every year in May, I come to the board to discuss a couple items before I present my final budget to you in June. The first one would be pricing. This is an easy one. I'm not planning on raising prices next year. Our prices will remain the same for paid lunches. This will be, again, the last time we changed was 22, 23 coming out of COVID, when prices were on the increase and everything. So we've held the same prices, and I plan on doing the same next year. Breakfast right now is free for all students. I haven't received anything from PDE saying that it won't be for next year. So I will be planning on breakfast still being free for all students next year, paid reduced for free. The other one is reduced price students right now are not being charged. They're essentially considered free students. So we get reimbursement from the state for the difference in the reduced students. I don't anticipate that changing. However, I don't have those final answers right yet. The second item that I'd like to bring to your attention or ask for your consideration tonight would be the wages for the support staff, my support staff, specifically in food service. The food service employees, in comparison to the other positions, starting rates in the other positions was much lower. I had spoken to Jason, and one of the things that I would like to propose for next year, and for the staff that I currently have, would be any type of increase that would go along with the performance evaluation, as well as a $1 increase in everyone's salary. With the new starting rate of $15 an hour for the food service staff, this will help bring my staff up to a comparable level. There will be a couple staff that we will need to address, because even with their performance based and their dollar increase, they would still be under that $15 starting rate. But we would address those. There's a couple things why I feel we could do this. Right now, the food service department is very good financial standing. Last year, Jason and I were speaking, we had an increase of $199,000 at the end of the school year. So we're very well self-sufficient. Any increase in food service salaries does not impact the general fund either. The food service department is self-funding, we're self-sufficient. General fund pays our salaries up front, and then we pay the district back. Again, we're in pretty good financial standing right now that I don't see that to be a problem. It's sustainable. It's not going to impact my budget drastically either. That's it. Hopefully this will help us retain the staff too. Right now I have very good staff. Compared to a lot of districts around us, the food service directors that I speak to, I'm very, very fortunate that I was almost fully staffed this year. I had one or two vacancies that we've been filling with substitutes. But in comparison to the other districts, I've been very, very fortunate. I think if anybody were to judge me as successful, which I think you do, but if you, I'm only successful because of the people I have, and I really count on them. I think I have a good staff. I think they're well deserving of the increase.
If you have an employee who's been working for you for 10 years or more, how much difference in salary are they going to be from someone who's just starting?
I would have to go back. I mean, I have. Let me see. So I'm looking for somebody. I have 7 years. They would be above the starting rate, not greatly above it.
How far above?
If they, depending on what the performance evaluation amount is and the dollar, 20 cents.
20 cents?
Yeah, right now that individual would be making $13.79. They would bump up to $15.20. So, I have some staff on. A lot of my staff have been here for 5 years or more. So again, I'm very fortunate for that. It would be a fairly significant jump for them. $1.25, $1.40 per hour.
What was the increase before you're asking for the, like, was it just based on the performance evaluation? And what, was it a percentage or was it a?
I did
my figuring based on whatever whatever Jason was saying.
Like
Yeah.
a quarter or something.
I was 3%, 3% for a proficient.
Hey, Scott might have mentioned this. The other thing this does is if looking at that chart, our class 3 paraprofessional aid versus start at $15. Our custodial needs technology class 3 starts at $15. So now our food service will start at $15. So for that they were lower than everyone
Correct.
else. So this would have the starting salary for our class 2 food service to be the same as those other supports.
And I would argue that my staff work just as hard as anybody else in the district and the support staff. I do too. If you had the opportunity to work in one of my kitchens or spend some time with them, it's not the old lunch lady. They move. They have a lot of responsibility. So
I can attest to that.
yeah, exactly. So
It still seems low, salaries
That's-
still seem low.
Sorry, that's what I was gonna say.
We can work on that.
Let's start down there.
yeah. So like I said, to start, whatever their evaluation is plus $1. If the board supports that, then I'll incorporate that into my budget for presentation in June, and I'll have those numbers for you.
Yeah. We can put that on the agenda for approval. That way, do it that way. And a vote.
Well, this support staff, salary ranges.
That's wrong. Okay, so that would be put it on that. No carve out or separate. Got it.
We're down to plus $1. Is that just the?
Yeah, I think it's only, that's what that.
You talk about the actual pay. The current. Yeah, you'll get that as part of the support staff. When you approve the rates for next year for every employee, their rates will be adjusted to show what Scott just said. Yeah, I was just, kind of what was being said here is, Scott said, hey, if I have your blessing, do we say, yeah, I'll give you a thumbs up, or are you just gonna move because nobody said that? I think that's what Mr. Kirkpatrick was getting at, I'm really getting at is, I give it a thumbs up. Everybody else nod ahead, we can do it.
Yeah, that's what we were discussing, is like, straw poll or not. I guess the easiest way is anybody against that.
Thank you. See you in June.
Thanks, Scott. Just real quick, I just wanted to, rarely get to see Scott, unless you're at the schools in the cafeterias, because he's very often, whenever there is, somebody doesn't show up, he's in the cafeteria working where his staff would be. So he did a great job, supporting his staff and supporting the schools. So I just wanted to call that out while he was here.
Only other item with item T, I didn't show the intensive instructional aid rate at $17 an hour, so that would be the class 2 for paraprofessionals, so I did want to add that. For the substitute rate under instructional aids at 15, you'll also see intensive instructional aids at 17. So that will be an adjustment on this sheet for next week.
That's good.
All right, thank you very much. And moving on, buildings and grounds, Mr. Gunning.
Okay, you'll see item A, numbers 1 and 2, both use requests associated with Dillsburg Community Fair. Questions on those? Item A for discussion, we have building and grounds report. I see Mr. Johnson here. Did you want to add any flavor to the report?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Gunning. If we just scroll down a little bit under preventative maintenance, everything in blue and moving forward is going to be any updates. I did add custodial equipment under preventative maintenance. It slipped my mind, but there's probably going to be some other things that gets added under that too. We currently use Billiard and Vortec to annually check over our equipment to make sure it's working the way it should be. And then under that roofing maintenance program, the assessment was completed by HALC and just waiting on the results. That was for Wellsville and the high school. 3 capital improvement projects. I did add some of the things that I have on my capital plan for this coming year, everything in blue, just to show that if it does get approved, that, you know, it's already on there and we just have to update it monthly. So the last one in blue there, the fire alarm system cell dollars, they are completed by Berkshire at the high school in South Mountain. And that was in an effort to get rid of the landlines for those buildings. That was step 1 from what I just learned, because unfortunately, well, unfortunately or not, our building security systems were running or are running off the same phone lines, which would be the panic button, the alarm system for the doors and whatever windows. So that'll have to be converted into the cell dollar in some way. So that's step 2 for that. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of that cost yet, but we would have had to do this anyway as either step 1 or 2. If we scroll down a little bit farther, looks like 4 is the same. 5 I added for on the radar, just some things that we're thinking about and hoping to move towards. Things that kind of maybe get forgotten about until it's time to do them, but to also let you guys know that there are some other things, you know, in the future there. Banfield lighting to replace that. Wellsville Elementary School roof, the high school roof, we talked about that, and the high school HVAC and stuff, just to get it on paper so everybody can see it. Action items for next month. Looks like the bollard delivery, that was late May, early June. We actually had one delivered today, unexpectedly. Everyone jumped in and handled it very well because they do weigh 2,000 pounds. So that worked out pretty well. RNS fence at Dillsburg, that was completed. That was part of the security. Mr. Labuda, that was on your list. And the panic button at admin is scheduled to be done, or I think it's, actually they just called me yesterday, they're waiting on the button, they have everything but the button itself. So once they get the button, they'll be in to do that in this building, and they're gonna run that through the fire alarm system, which is already on the cell tower. So here, we're good as far as landlines go in that respect.
And the goal is vehicle intrusion, right? Protection in 2 sets. Environmental design, it's a pretty way. They're not the poles. They're huge plan. I didn't see that one today. That's cool. Came huge planners, but they still serve as vehicle intrusion protection for students. So appreciate us, and it's grant fund. Appreciate us getting moving on that. Hopefully plant some big herbs in there or something.
We can even paint them purple if you want.
Actually, paint them is not weird.
Get the high school kids that did their plant films so we can get them out there.
And then the greenhouse punch list. Prefer not to go over each item on there, but I will say if you scroll down to the bottom, so we're still experiencing some issues and concerns with the glass not being sealed properly and leaking. I did find out the credit for from UPG for not gasketing the windows is $9,300, $9,300 for not gasketing. They are complete with the caulk, and we're still experiencing issues. So we have reached out to another company to come give us kind of an overview, some insight. Hershocks is the first company that we're going to have a look at it. And I have a list of Baker's dozen of other companies, semi-local and very local, which I can work off of to get a second opinion on the windows specifically, and also the irrigation system, which I'm not going to say has continued to fail, but it's continued to fail in different ways. It's not the same issue every single time. So we want to make sure that that was done properly as well. But again, I've got about 13 companies, 14 including Hershocks, that are going to look at those 2 bottom items for us.
What do you
think the ballpark figure would be to replace all those windows?
To replace them, 200, 250,
250,000?
that would be my guess. And if that gets it to stop leaking, then maybe that's what we need to do. But just waiting on them to come out and assess them for us.
And what do you think the approximate total cost of the whole project is as of today?
250-ish, Jason, if that sounds accurate to you too. It's not over budget, I do know that. I can't give you a specific, but it's not over budget.
So any timeline for, did Hershops give you a timeline to come out?
They're supposed to be out this week.
Okay.
So if you remember anything about Hershops from the last time we had them come out for the SLC window or at the gymnasium, they said they'd be out this week and then it got pushed to that week and they never gave us a date and then they finally came out and did it. It's supposed to be this week. I don't know exactly. But I will be reaching out to these other companies tomorrow, Thursday.
It's probably reasonable we would have an assessment by next month.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Just for second.
Yep.
Separate note, can you just talk about the chiller at the middle school and if that's been resolved or not?
It has been resolved. Yep. Parts came in, repairs were made, and it's working.
And that came in sooner than expected because it was back ordered?
No, the electrical components, it's basically two capacitors that weren't available, had to be made. The lead time was 7 to 10 days. It took all of the 10 days from the time they actually ordered it. But it's up and working as of Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else, any other questions for the building and grounds report? Yeah, I just wanted to throw on the pictures of the athletic fields. That was something we talked about a couple months ago. Matt has done a lot of great work. I know you've all seen the softball field as you drive in here every time you come for a meeting. I'm not sure if any of you have been back to see the baseball field, but it looks just as good. There's a picture from last week when I went to watch part of a game. And so our fields are fantastic. So I just wanted to thank Matt. He comes and gives you all this information. I think a thank you is due as well because the athletic fields have, he's done a great job with them. So thanks, Matt.
Then we have item B, discussion item, which is a proposal from a local foundation to renovate the pedestrian tunnel.
Last fall, a district resident approached the district about his family's foundation contributing $40,000 annually for improvements to our buildings and grounds. I'm not gonna mention his foundation's name yet, because I'm not sure he wants it to be public, so I'll find that out. So just speaking generically about the foundation, they'll work with the administration annually then to recommend a project that falls outside of the district's existing capital improvements and maintenance plans and would serve to improve the aesthetic of the district or to, just to support our brand, our northern brand. Either of those or both of those. This year's proposal is for improvements to the tunnel under Route 74, connecting the east and west campuses. So if you've ever traveled that, you might see there's some great painting. It's been newly painted, so that looks nice, but it's still a little worse for wear. So that's something they identified and brought to the administration for our consideration, and then we are coming to the board. They generated some renderings. They're not very involved, but they're just concept ideas, just to give an idea of what they might do. There's no commitment involved in these, but these are shared with the board just to give you an idea of what they would like to do. It's painting, it's addressing the drainage, it's addressing the floor of it, And then externally, maybe looking at some aesthetic things as well. So again, they're not committed one way or the other to what they're going to do, but we wanted to get the boards, okay, to give them the okay to move forward, and if so, then they will spend some more time working with us and coming up with some more involved technical renderings for the project. So, are we okay with this potential improvement to the tunnel? Is anybody not okay with this improvement?
My only question would be is, so who would be determining the scope of work? Is that something where Mr. Johnson builds a laundry list of items that, hey, here's what we'd like to see improved? He reaches out to get the pricing associated with it to determine the budget.
No, that's being done by the foundation.
So
The Polar Bear Foundation is doing all of that.
it's the Polar Bear Foundation would determine the scope of work and say, hey, we want to put this light in or that, and we would say yes, no.
Correct. After our review and approval of that, Mr. Johnson would look at what they're wanting to do, that work would actually go through the foundation. It's unique in that way. Usually the work would be done by us, and then we would receive the money from the foundation. Because of the timing of the donation, it was agreed to that the foundation will be actually doing the work for this project. But we will have the oversight in the final, well, not the final, but approval of what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure, I mean, nobody knows our facilities better than us. I just want to make sure we're involved in that initial process of it, of talking through any needs we have or anything we felt like, what if we have money for this, we want to make sure this piece happens. And then say, for example, it'd be like a anti-something on the floor there. I just want to make sure that Mr. Johnson or someone from the district is involved at their own stages.
Very good. We did have an initial meeting, Matt Johnson, Angie Gato, being between the field, Steve Lehman. We just kind of talked about, okay, what are some things we would anticipate we want to have. So I envision the next step then being getting together with that foundation, those folks, talking through all those things, and making sure we're all speaking the same language in every part.
Great, thank you.
Do we know if the construction or reconstruction of the tunnel is gonna affect the roadway? Like, is there gonna be a drag time or shutdown? It is underground, I didn't need a tunnel.
Right.
that-
I would
is
not
that
expect
discussion?
that. That would be, I'd be really surprised. I don't think we would do that. We would do anything to affect traffic to that scale. I think it would be more superficial, aesthetic kind of changes.
We can't have any construction that would require permitting and all kinds of stuff. It's painting, putting flooring down, that's pretty much it. Make it look prettier.
Yeah, I think it's great. If somebody wants to step up and help upgrade things, so that's great.
Thank you.
That's it for voting now.
All right, athletics and activities, Mr. Schwilly.
Mr. Kyle, item A, number 1 is the girls' basketball PT camp, Kings Madison University, in June. And the second one is a letter of agreement, True North Wellness, for mental health and drug and alcohol. And, we used these guys last year.
Yeah, so,
Talk about it a little bit about that.
yeah, absolutely. And if there's any questions on any of items, I know I raised through HJK, budget finance, just reach out to me during the week. I'm more than happy to cover anything there. Yeah, these two letters of agreement are with True North, which is who we do have contracts with currently. This is grant funded. We're required to have a student assistance program, grade 6 through 12. And that program is required to have liaisons from professional organizations to support our student assistance team, which is made up of our own staff in the areas of drug and alcohol and mental health. And so True North provides those liaisons to our middle school and high school student assistance teams. The drug and alcohol is free if you went through the thing, free, but it's county funded. The mental health is not county funded, so that is there's a charge for that, and that's what we use part of the same school. So those are for 2 liaisons to our SAP teams at the middle school and high school, and they are annual agreements. Should the grant ever go away, we
Who did we use before these guys?
We did not have a liaison, which we were required to have. And so, so we went out to verbal, called 3 places, Team Line, Keystone, and True North. And got True North, and if you've heard, Cumberland County Team Line was disbanded. So now Cumberland County, those 7 districts are scrambling, trying to find a liaison for their SAP teams. And True North may, although they struggle with staffing sometimes, they may get a lot of that business. So, this is the first agreement we've had. This is the 3rd year. So.
SAP makes a referral. What do you think is the ballpark timeline on a call back from them to see the student?
Oh, it's fairly quickly because they're at the actual meeting, and so the referral comes in from the anonymous student, the staff, the parent, and then the team sits, meets, discusses what's the issue, eating disorder, mental health, depression, so on and so forth. Then the team decides, okay, is this something we want to bring or have our liaison work with? And then that liaison does the assessment within, I would say, 2 weeks. I would say, because by the next SAP meeting, they're reporting back. And it is an assessment, it's not treatment. I want to point that out also. True North comes out with a liaison, they do the assessment, and they make the recommendation there. But it's a fairly quick turnaround.
2 weeks is accurate.
I just had one within a week recently. The referral was in, and within a week, they met with the student. So,
You see the number of referrals remaining pretty steady, or you see an increase? Or what do you see?
We've actually seen a decrease in student assistance program referrals. We've seen some decreases in some other areas that you'll see in executive session during a confidential report I'll share in general, but we are seeing some decreases in the mental health areas. So,
Thank you.
Very much. And policy, Mr. Miller.
Mr. President, we have 1 policy for final approval and 6 for tentative approval. I believe Mr. Wood has a review of the 6 for tentative.
yeah, thanks, Mrs. Ross. If you just pull up the executive summary, I appreciate that. You see that up there in front of you. So we have our policy 253. There have been no changes to this policy from the first version you reviewed in April. So I simply put the April changes back on the same executive summary. So these changes that you see on this summary document, bold-faced, they're the same ones you saw in April. So tentative approval, we have a bunch of policies here. I did have Saxton and Stump and ILC look over multiple policies this month, and so each gave feedback. But I guess to summarize, the policies 103, 104, 234, those 3. A lot of districts, when the Title IX changes came in 2022-ish, changed all their policies to align with that. But our solicitor, Stock Leader at the time, said, no, hold off. Stuff's too uncertain. There's an election coming up. Wait. And then lo and behold, in 2024, whenever that was, the Title IX came out. And so we're making very, 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 very limited changes to our policies because we still have our 2020 policy in place, basically, because we didn't make the changes in 2022. Whereas a lot of districts are completely, actually, they're going back to their 2020 policy they're pulling out of the archive. So the changes we have here for 103, 104, there's just definitions added for what pregnancy is, race, religious creed. Obviously, those classifications were always protected in the past. Could not discriminate based on any of those things. Those definitions just weren't in the policy.
so now they're being added to the policy. Okay, but of course, the couldn't discriminate on that. And then we did add to the bottom of 103 and 104 a statement that says maintaining sex-based distinctions permitted by law does not constitute discrimination, right? And that came from one of our solicitors, just to make sure that that was in both of those policies. So that was additions to 103, 104. So really nothing major for us. 103, 104, some additional definitions and a statement at the bottom protecting us. Same thing, 234, again, the pregnant parenting, married students, it's protected under code. We had our policy, probably my fault, I guess. This one was a little bit, the language needed to be changed. We had some old school language in there about requiring notes to tell us you're pregnant or whatever for sport reasons and stuff like that. And we needed to get in there, and PSBA came up with a recommended policy, and I'm glad because we made some changes. So you'll see that we removed those two paragraphs from the policy, but then in the back, if you go to the next page, you'll see we did add, and again, these were overseen by our two firms that guide us. Just some of what are those modifications we would make should a student be pregnant, right? And the breaks during class, access to online if homebound instruction if needed. We would adjust their schedule, their courses if needed, which we do already. Allow flexibility. So we just updated this policy. It needed to be updated. So nothing substantive, I would say, in terms of like law or legal stuff, but it was a good update that came out from PSBA, and glad they sent that out. So those three are kind of related in terms of the terminology. And then policy 317. Believe it or not, our code of professional practice and conduct for educators, which Dr. Megan speaks to, and we all speak to that, and Mr. Patrick sent a memo out at the start of the year on that. That wasn't linked to our policy 317, and so there was a suggestion to put that in there. So if you click on that link, you'll see that's what we are all governed by. And then I also added in there that a couple other things there. Notice from the PA Department of Education could come through the TIM system, the Teacher Information Management System, to Mr. Kirkpatrick. That is now one way we could be notified of a teacher or administrator or anyone working for the school who makes some mistakes or gets in trouble. So we want to have that in policy that says that is one way that we might be notified. So it's suggested that statement be added in there. 317.1, educator misconduct. The only change there is we replaced Title IX sex-based discrimination or harassment with Title IX sexual harassment. It's just a suggestion to just make it more concise. Didn't change anything, didn't change protections, didn't change classifications of people who are protected, but the PSBA updated policy recommended you just simply say Title IX sexual harassment instead of Title IX sexual harassment and discrimination. So that was a change made to 320. So those are the policies before you, one for final approval and 6 for tentative. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to either answer them now or find out for you for next week. Yeah, so policy 320, I may have not talked about, we changed the title. So it went from, to make it more clear, we added clarity, freedom of speech by employees, which is what it was intended to be, but it had non-school settings. So the PSBA recommended policy is that we change that title to that. So that's the first statement there. And then we added some detail to the policy, just to clarify that, staff have freedom of speech. We just have to see if there's a nexus to school and their jobs, so on and so forth. But it just reinforces that when they're outside of the workday and not in their profession, they have a right to do that. So, those are some of the changes that were, made for each one. So I missed that section.
Alright, thank you very much. In board operations, we don't have anything, any new business. Okay.
One of them, I know we've had some community members talk about it, I know we've kind of talked about it casually. But actually looking into having our board meetings put on the district website, or streaming them, or doing some other way of having them more readily available to the public. And then I also have another one, and I don't know, this kind of touched on, I feel like now maybe I shouldn't say it, but with Mr. Burrell, oh my gosh, I can't talk anymore today. Was reviewing the disciplinary policy amongst the elementary schools. The disciplinary policy, that the handbook that is there, it's across all four, and it seems pretty cut and dry, but I think each principal, of course, handles each one of their buildings a little differently, and maybe giving the staff some more support to make things a little more clear cut for them, giving them some better options when there are situations of violence, and having those kids actually held accountable and punished, because once they get to the middle school, there is actual punishment for them. And it's kind of a shock if it's a kid that has a behavioral issue, maybe not a special situation, but maybe just a behavioral issue. So that was something that I wanted to present.
So just to clarify, you wanna review policy or?
I think in my opinion, maybe I guess reviewing the policy and making sure that it's kind of clear cut for all of our administrators and the staff within the elementary schools. I don't think it's an issue in middle school and high school. I think it's just an elementary. I think we give our little kids a little bit more leeway than what maybe they should be given, and to help the teachers help kind of curb some of those behaviors. So maybe reviewing it and giving them some better, I don't know, outlets or help with those kids with those situations.
I can maybe add some thoughts there. So, yeah, so there is a board policy. Policy is fairly general. It's not gonna get into that elementary, you know, we do this. More than happy to bring policy to 18 student discipline up for review, absolutely. But then what we do have is we have a code of conduct, which is required to be board approved. It's a district-wide code of conduct. So we have one that governs the school day, and then we have an extracurricular code of conduct, and we bring that to the board. We used to bring it every 3 years, but then if there was a change that we felt we needed to make, sometimes we get a little more aggressive with DNA violations, so it comes forth to you before that. If we want to change the dress code, we might bring it forward to you for those 3 years. And so inside those code of conducts is where you'll find some of the nitty gritty. And then if you go down further, there's student handbooks, which I think is what you're referring to. We've done a pretty good job of making sure whatever's in the handbook aligns with whatever the code of conducts and the guidelines say, which still fall under the policy. So we want to be careful that when we make changes to one, that they're all aligned. So perhaps what I'm hearing is maybe we take a look at the elementary student handbook, that all 4 principals, we have one, like you said, for all 4, and take a look at that document.
Because I read the elementary, I don't remember if it was the student one or if it was just the code of conduct, or, you know, with the actual policy of disciplinary action. I think it was the elementary student handbook.
Yes.
That gives like the breakdown of everything. I think it's more or less of like when the kids actually get in trouble, if they're actually receiving a punishment and not saying, okay, you can get a lollipop now at the end of the day, but I throat punched a kid 4 hours ago, kind of thing. And I know that may sound extreme, but I've had some teachers come to me and say, say they do a reward system. And that's great, you know, our kids are little, you know, they're little kids, but I think some of them kind of push that boundary a little bit, just as all kids do. So I don't know if that's something that can be reviewed, maybe the reward system, or like when they are getting in trouble, like holding kids down on the playground and no one gets a detention, no one gets, do you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And I know it's printed there in paper, but I'm wondering if it's more of a professional development maybe, or time with the teachers, or time with the principals, or whatever.
Okay, so if we want the document to change, the 4 elementary principals meet annually. Dr. Meekin oversees them, but we meet annually, and they look at that handbook and update it annually. So the actual handbook, the student handbook, which you read, is updated on an annual basis. The professional development for what's in that handbook, if you're saying that there's some gaps between, it says that you're supposed to do this, but the teachers don't know how to do this, that's a bigger discussion with professional development, Mr. Burrell. But we do look at that student handbook on an annual basis, the 4 elementary principals, and we utilize that. So I'm happy to bring that here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you guys are gonna take a look at that before the beginning of the school year.
Yeah.
With the 4 principals.
Yep.
Could maybe you just report back if there are any changes, is that okay?
Or if there's issues, like, I don't know, sure.
Yeah, thoughts from them and then
Yeah, thoughts
administration.
from them as far as like how they, I think one of my big concerns is, you know, when the kids do something actually wrong, are they getting punished in, you know, not just saying.
Things look differently at the elementary than at the
Yes.
middle and at the high school, and so
Yeah.
that is true, right? That doesn't
Like I
mean
said,
it's
if a
not
kid's
being
getting-
dealt with or handled,
Yeah.
but what's appropriate for a 7-year-old is different than what's appropriate for a 17-year-old. So it won't be the same.
Yeah.
But we will look at that, and I'm happy to report back to the board. Once we do that, it'll probably either be June or July.
Yeah, but don't do it tomorrow, I want you to take your time.
But they take a lot of time and chew through that and really talk about how they want to intervene with students when students are struggling and they're presenting challenging behaviors. And so they do have things they do, but it does look different. So yeah, I'm happy to do that, exactly.
Thank you very much. And then as far as board meetings being streamed, I mean, is that something that the board wants to look into? Anybody have any other thoughts on that?
Right, I mean, I guess, just in general, I think at this point, we're just kind of listing a couple of new items for future discussion. Right, so that's an item that I think, yeah, we should have a future discussion. Let everybody kind of wrap their, you know, get their thoughts together for next month or whatever.
Administration needs, whatever resources we need, put on the bed, pros and cons.
Yeah, probably start with the board, just having a discussion about whether we're going to use it.
Any other new business? Alright, and we have executive session for personnel.